In this lesson, we're going to learn how to use our conditional statement as well as a set color node to change our particles to black when they enter the second beaker. So here's where we left off, and if we play through our sequence, we can see that our test distance to surface is working. Or in other words, as soon as it enters the second beaker or it gets close enough, it gets tagged with a 1. So whatever we plug into this true, if true, will get evaluated. Now right now we have just an add forces plugged in. For now, let's just disconnect that and let's plug in something else so we can see this a little bit more clearly. So I'm going to disconnect. And let's say we want to change the color of our particles. Well, let's take a look. So I'm going to look for something that changes the particle. Just clear, and then looking for something that changes the particle and color. So I can get the particle color, we can modify it, or we can set it. Let's drag in a set particle color node. Now we could do this with either set particle or the modify particle color. But I'm going to use the set particle color because it's a little bit easier to understand. So let's plug the execute port into the if true, and let's double click this to see what color we're changed into. So currently it's on a blue, so what we should see is when something enters beaker 2, the particle turns blue. And we do see that effect. Great. Now, this is a pretty sharp transition. As soon as it gets close enough, it sort of just turns blue immediately. And if we render this out, it would be a pretty jarring switch. So let's figure out how we can change these into black over a set amount of time or over a few frames instead of just doing such a sharp shift. So let's first just pull this down to black, but of course this is just going to do the exact same. As soon as it enters the beaker, it just turns black. So what we want to do is we want to figure out what the particle color is before it enters the beaker and then just start making it darker. So we're going to need to get the particle color. So we can drag in a get particle color node. Let's plug this in. And now we can plug our color into our color. Now, of course, this is just going to turn our current particles the exact same color they are. So in between these two nodes, we're going to need to change the color. So let's see what we can do with colors. So I'm just going to type in color. So we can get color, we can modify it. There's some randomize. We can add blend. I'm looking for something that'll make it darker. Now subtract color, that looks like it's going to make it darker because subtraction always makes things darker when we're working with a color range. So let's add this into our tree here. So let's plug the get particle color into the first and then the result into the set particle color. So what this subtract color node is now going to do is it's going to take the first input, which is the particle color on the current frame, and then subtract whatever color we have in the second. Now right now we have black. So you may be thinking that it will turn it black. However, if we play, we can see that no color change is happening. It's because, remember, we're doing subtraction. So anything minus 0 is whatever it started out with. So what we need to do is we need to make this color a little bit brighter. So we can click this color swatch and just increase this brightness just a little bit. Click close, and now let's play this through again. So now, as long as it's inside the second beaker, we're going to be subtracting this color value from it. And we can see these particles are starting to get darker and darker the longer they spend in this beaker. Great, so now our particles aren't shifting directly into black, but they're sort of doing a slow descent into a darker color. So remember that you can use the subtraction and addition to slowly change a value instead of having to just set it on a specific color. Okay, so now that we have our particles colored, let's now make them bounce a little less inside of our beaker here. So to do that, we can actually just do something very quick. We can come up here to our bounce off surface node. Let's just collapse it for a second here. And remember that the property, bounce factor, controls how much energy these particles keep. So if we turn this down, what we're going to get is our particles are going to bounce less. However, they're going to bounce less in the first beaker as well. So I'd rather only change the second beaker's effect. So what we can do is we can simply create a new or copy the current bounce off surface. So let's Control C, Control V, and that will create our new node here. And now we can just simply drag our surface 3, which is the second beaker, onto our new bounce off surface node and connect it in. And now all we need to do is connect our bounce off surface into a free port in our ice tree, and now we have a bounce off surface that only is changing our our second beaker. So we can reduce this bounce factor by quite a bit, and now when a particle comes into our second beaker, it's going to have a lot less energy, so it should slow down quite quickly. And we can see that happening. It does a small bounce and then it rests. Now, as we can see, a lot of these are sort of congregating, or they're all moving to one side. And we can make a random angle for it to bounce off of if we turn this randomness angle up. And now these will bounce at a random angle when they hit the second beaker. Okay, so let me stop my animation here, or stop the simulation, and let's hold Q and let's take a look. Now currently the strands are still overpowering it, so even if we have a single, or even if the particles are darker, the strands that are surrounding them are overpowering this effect. So what we can do is, in the next lesson, we can learn how we can grow our particle size and make them much larger so that they cover the strands and we get our desired effect. So in this lesson, we learned how we can use a set particle color connected up to a subtract color along with a get particle color to make our particles darker. And we could also use many of the other methods of editing colors, such as adding it or blending colors together to get different effects. So again, this is just one way to turn our particles slowly into a darker color. We also, in this lesson, broke apart our bounce-off surface to have a specific bounce-off surface node just for our second beaker so that our bounce factor could be lower and so our particles could rest at the bottom of the beaker. So, in the next lesson, we'll continue working on our ice tree.